The broadcast from Earth flickered on the screens of millions across the galaxy. The image was simple, an open plaza filled with people from every corner of Earth, waving flags, cheering, their faces radiant with pride. But behind the cheerful smiles, the message was clear. Humanity was done with the Galactic Council. On the screen, a figure stepped forward, a leader from the United Human Front, a coalition of Earth's government and military factions. He raised his hand for silence, and the crowd quieted instantly. His voice echoed through the vast hall, carried across the stars, reaching every world within the Council's domain. We have tolerated your laws, your bureaucracy, and your restrictions for too long. For centuries, you have tried to shape us in your image. But today, we stand as ourselves, unbowed and free. Today, humanity walks away from the Council. No longer will we bend to your will. His words hit like a bombshell. Across the galaxy, Council members exchanged nervous glances. The Vordar, with their calculating minds, immediately began assessing the political fallout. The Kshathar, known for their martial might, bristled with quiet fury, their hands instinctively gripping the hilts of their blades. The humans, with their tendency for wild, unpredictable action, had dared to declare themselves free. The human leader continued, his voice full of conviction. We will no longer be a part of your stagnating alliance. We will carve our own path, one shaped by our choices and our dreams. Let the galaxy see what happens when humanity is unleashed. The broadcast ended abruptly, and for several moments, no one spoke. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the Council's response. But the message had already been sent. The Council was no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. Humanity had made its choice, and it was a choice for freedom and independence. Within the halls of the Galactic Council, the reaction was immediate and intense. A dozen species, some ancient, some newer to the galactic stage, discussed what to do next. The Vordar leader, known for their cold, logical approach, was the first to speak. His voice was calm, but the underlying tension in his words was undeniable. Humanity's departure is an act of rebellion. It cannot go unanswered. If we allow this, others will follow. The Kshathar, ever the warriors, were less measured in their response. The sharp, guttural voice of their commander cut through the room, filled with righteous anger. This cannot stand. Their arrogance will be their undoing. We must strike quickly and decisively. Despite the Council's diverse species, the consensus was clear. Humanity's defection would be met with force. A swift and overwhelming response was necessary to prevent further rebellion from spreading. Yet, unknown to the Council, humanity's move had already set a chain of events in motion that would alter the galaxy's destiny forever. The Council might have thought they could quell this defiance with ease, but they had severely underestimated humanity's resourcefulness, their hunger for freedom, and above all, their resilience. As the Council debated their course of action, thousands of light years away, human leaders were already preparing for the storm to come. The time of politics and diplomacy was over. Humanity was ready to stand on its own, to fight if necessary, and to prove to the galaxy that they were not just a fledgling species to be controlled, but a force to be reckoned with. The first seed of a revolution had been planted. In the wake of humanity's bold departure from the Galactic Council, the galaxy teetered on the edge of an unprecedented upheaval. The first few days were filled with a tense, palpable silence as species from across the galaxy waited to see how the Council would respond. But that silence soon shattered. The Vordar, calculating and precise, began to move their forces. They saw the human exit as a challenge to their meticulously crafted order. As diplomats from the Council prepared their strategies to bring the humans back into fold with promises of greater autonomy, the military faction of the Kshathar, led by Commander Tar, took a far more direct approach. The Kshathar, always eager to prove their might, were swift to mobilize their fleet, directing it toward human space. The first strike came within days. A coalition of mercenary ships, sponsored by the Kshathar, launched a surprise attack on a major human trade route just outside the reach of the Terran frontier. They cut off vital supply lines and began raiding cargo convoys that had once been protected by the Council's neutral laws. The mercenaries were equipped with advanced weaponry, but they were far from a match for the humans. The humans had been prepared for this. Human military forces, despite being smaller and less technologically advanced in terms of raw firepower, were agile, unpredictable, and fiercely determined. Commander Sarah Walker of the United Human Fleet was the first to respond. Walker, a seasoned strategist, immediately recognized the situation for what it was: the beginning of a concerted campaign to force them back into the Council's fold. But the humans would not be intimidated. She deployed a squadron of stealth ships, modified to cloak their presence until the last possible moment. In an audacious move, the humans struck back. They intercepted the mercenary forces in a daring ambush, using their smaller, more maneuverable ships to exploit weaknesses in the attackers' formations. The mercenaries, unprepared for such a fight, were taken by surprise. Their ships were torn apart in a matter of hours, and many of their crews were captured. The humans sent a clear message: they were no easy prey. The victory sent ripples throughout the galaxy. It wasn't just a tactical win. It was a declaration of defiance. Humanity had not only refused to be controlled by the Council, but they had shown that they could hold their own against larger, more powerful forces. The Council had underestimated the humans, thinking them too young, too disorganized to be a true threat. But the humans had just proved otherwise. Back in Council chambers, panic set in. The Vordar representatives demanded action. Their cold, logical minds quickly devised a plan to reassert dominance over the humans. But as the Vordar worked in the background, quietly mobilizing their own forces, a fracture appeared within the ranks of the Council. Several smaller species, previously intimidated by the Council's power, now began to question the very foundation of their alliances. They had long suspected that the Council had maintained an oppressive hold over the galaxy, but now, watching the humans carve their own path, the doubts grew louder. The first defectors were unexpected. The Kalori, a reptilian species with a fierce warrior tradition, were the first to publicly announce their neutrality. The Kalori had once been a key ally of the Xalthar, but now they stood at a crossroads. If the humans can stand on their own, why should we continue to bow to the Council's overreach? Their leader, Sarak, declared in a broadcast that stunned the galaxy. This was only the beginning. Within weeks, trade between human systems and neutral species flourished, bypassing the Council's restrictive tariffs. Despite the Council's attempts to stifle the growing movement, the humans began to thrive in their newfound autonomy. Their trade agreements were booming, their military strategies were gaining notoriety, and word of their victory against the mercenaries spread like wildfire. But as tensions mounted, the Council wasn't ready to admit defeat. Behind closed doors, they began to devise harsher measures to regain control. They were determined not to allow one species to dismantle the order that had governed the galaxy for centuries. They began sending out covert agents, not just to sabotage human assets, but to discredit them, to paint them as reckless and dangerous. Meanwhile, the humans were watching. Their intelligence networks, bolstered by their new alliances, were picking up on the Council's covert activities. Humanity had just begun to see how deeply the Council's control ran through the galaxy's veins. The galaxy wasn't just a place of peace. There were dark secrets hidden beneath the surface, secrets the humans were now intent on uncovering. The first seeds of rebellion had been sown. The galaxy, once united under the Council's rule, was beginning to splinter. The first real bloodshed between the humans and the galaxy's other species erupted on the outskirts of the Sol system, where the humans' swift response to the mercenary attack had ignited a series of escalating tensions. What had started as an isolated skirmish soon exploded into a full-blown conflict. Commander Sarah Walker, emboldened by the resounding success of their ambush against the mercenaries, quickly recognized that they had to act decisively. She knew that the Council would not let humanity's independence go unchallenged for long. She also knew that the Council had long-standing grudges against the humans' innate rebellious spirit, and the mercenaries they'd faced were only the beginning. The Kshathar and Vordar had far more substantial forces ready to pounce. Despite being outgunned in terms of sheer firepower, the humans had one advantage that none of the other species could match: their ability to think outside the box. Walker deployed her forces to a cluster of asteroid fields near the fringe of human space. They set up traps, mined the area with advanced sensor jamming devices, and planted false intelligence on Council networks to mislead their enemies into thinking they were more vulnerable than they really were. The idea was simple. If the Council was going to attack, the humans would make them pay for every inch. And soon enough, the Council took the bait. The first major fleet to arrive was led by a Kshathar dreadnought, a massive warship capable of devastating entire fleets with its advanced weaponry. Its commander, Tar, had a personal vendetta against the humans for their defection from the Council. He wasn't just fighting for the Council, he was fighting to prove that the humans were nothing more than a flash in the pan. Too reckless to survive in the harsh galaxy they had so eagerly tried to escape. The Kshathar fleet entered the asteroid field, confident in their superiority. They moved as one, a relentless machine of war. But as they pushed deeper into the field, they found themselves surrounded. Suddenly, the quiet of space was shattered as human ships emerged from the shadows, striking fast and hard. The humans' smaller vessels, nimble and fast, darted in and out of the asteroid clusters, firing precision shots that disabled key systems on the Kshathar ships. Each time they struck, they'd vanish before the Kshathar could retaliate. The battle was chaos. Tar, furious at the surprise, ordered his fleet to spread out and engage with all firepower, but it was too late. The humans had already planned their next move. A brilliant maneuver by Walker's fleet turned the tide. With the Kshathar focused on targeting the human ships in the asteroid field, they failed to notice the second wave, human reinforcements from the nearby station of Titan IV. These ships, equipped with stealth cloaking technology and powerful EMP weapons, launched a devastating counterstrike. The EMP blasts disabled the Kshathar fleet's communications, leaving them isolated and vulnerable. The human ships, having cut through the confusion, wreaked havoc on the once proud Kshathar dreadnoughts, their advanced weapons completely neutralized. The battle ended in a stunning victory for the humans, but it was not without cost. Several human ships had been lost, their brave crews forever entombed in the cold of space. Yet, in the wake of the battle, the message was unmistakable. Humanity could, and would fight for its survival. Back in Council chambers, the results of the Kshathar's defeat reverberated like a shockwave. Commander Tar's defeat was not only a blow to the Kshathar's pride, but also a blow to the entire Council's military might. How could they have allowed such a small and insignificant species to prevail? The Vordar, stoic as always, said little, but their minds worked quickly, strategizing for the next move. But there were other, more immediate concerns. The humans had not just won a battle, they had sent a message to every species in the galaxy. Defy the Council, and you will face the full fury of the human spirit. Despite their technological superiority and vast military resources, the Council began to question whether they could truly bring the humans to heel. And the galaxy began to take notice. Systems once ruled by fear began to look at the humans with newfound respect, and perhaps even hope. On the battlefield, though, the war was far from over. The Council would retaliate, and humanity would stand its ground, no matter the cost. The victory at the asteroid field had sent shockwaves across the galaxy, but the humans knew that this was only the beginning. The Galactic Council, humiliated by the defeat of its Kshathar fleet, was not going to let the rebellious humans go unpunished. The Council's leaders, fueled by a mix of anger and pride, began planning their next move with a single undeniable goal: destroy humanity's defiance once and for all. Commander Tar, reeling from his defeat, had returned to the Kshathar homeworld. He was determined to avenge the humiliation and show that no species could escape the Council's reach. As he rallied the Kshathar military, the Vordar quietly began to move their own forces into position. They were the masterminds behind many of the galaxy's greatest campaigns, and their intelligence and strategy were unparalleled. If the Kshathar failed, the Vordar would take over. It wasn't long before the combined fleets of the Vordar and Kshathar began their march toward human space. This time, they were bringing their full strength. The Council would not be taking any chances. In response, the humans were already preparing for the inevitable. Commander Sarah Walker knew that the odds were stacked against them, facing not just the Kshathar, but now the cunning and intelligence of the Vordar as well. But she had something the Council didn't, a will to fight that couldn't be broken. The humans' first move was to fortify their outer defenses. But Walker, ever the strategist, realized that the real fight wasn't going to be won by just holding ground. If they were going to survive, they would need to outsmart their enemies once again. She ordered her fleet to scatter across human space, setting up decoys and creating false intel streams to mislead the approaching enemy. Meanwhile, the newly formed rebel coalition, composed of species who had defected from the Council or remained neutral, began to rally behind the humans. They knew that if the humans fell, the galaxy would be forever subjugated by the Council's authoritarian rule. The coalition sent what ships they could spare, bolstering humanity's defenses and providing valuable intel. The war, it seemed, was no longer just between the humans and the Council. It was a galaxy-wide struggle for freedom. As the Kshathar and Vordar fleets closed in, the humans launched their counteroffensive. In a daring move, Walker led her fleet into a nearby nebula, a dense cloud of gas and dust that would severely hinder the enemy's sensors. The nebula, filled with electromagnetic interference, had long been a forbidden area for spacefaring species, an ideal spot for a surprise ambush. The humans knew that this would be their best chance to cripple the enemy before they could strike. And so they lay in wait, hidden in the thick clouds of the nebula, their ships cloaked and silent. When the enemy entered the nebula, they were greeted with an overwhelming hail of fire. The ambush was devastating. The Kshathar fleet, caught in the midst of the chaos, was torn apart by surprise attacks. Their dreadnoughts and flagship ships, once thought to be invincible, were disabled within minutes. The humans' precision strikes crippled the Vordar's fleet's communications, throwing them into disarray. But even as the humans fought back with unparalleled skill, the Kshathar and Vordar quickly regrouped. They weren't willing to concede defeat so easily. The battle raged on for hours, with the nebula becoming a twisted battlefield of ships dodging through clouds of gas and debris. The humans were outnumbered, and each ship lost was a tremendous blow. Yet, time and time again, they displayed ingenuity and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. As the battle drew to a close, the Kshathar and Vordar were forced to retreat, but the cost to the humans had been immense. While they had won the day, their fleet had been severely damaged, and many lives were lost. Commander Walker, bruised but resolute, sent word to the human colonies, urging them to prepare for the next wave. The Council wouldn't stop coming. They knew this now, but there was something different about the situation. The Kshathar and Vordar had been forced to retreat, yes, but they had also underestimated the humans' capacity for survival. The message was loud and clear to the Council. Humanity would not be easily broken. The war, though costly, had shown the galaxy that the humans were more than a threat. They were a force to be reckoned with. Even in the face of relentless pursuit, even in the aftermath of bloodshed, humanity would keep fighting. And the Council knew it was only a matter of time before their carefully constructed order began to unravel. The battle in the nebula had left the humans victorious, but the cost was steep. The Council, shaken by the defeat, was determined not to let this insubordination go unanswered. Their pride, bruised by the tenacity of the humans, demanded swift retaliation. The Vordar and Kshathar fleets, though crippled, quickly regrouped and reinforced. Their losses had been significant, but their resolve had only hardened. The galaxy, once held together by the fragile peace of the Galactic Council, was on the brink of war. The rebellion was no longer a mere nuisance. It was a declaration of a new era, one where the species under the Council's thumb would no longer kneel in fear. But the question that loomed over the galaxy like a shadow was whether the humans would be able to withstand the might of the entire Council. Would their spirit be enough to change the course of history? Humanity's leaders knew they could not afford to wait for the Council's next move. The longer they let their enemies regroup, the more likely the Council would strike back with overwhelming force. Commander Sarah Walker, ever the strategist, called an emergency council meeting of the United Human Front. Leaders from various factions and coalitions gathered, all united in their common purpose, to fight and survive. "We've won battles," Walker began, her voice steady yet filled with urgency. "But this war is far from over. We can't afford to take our foot off the pedal. The Council will strike again, harder, faster. We need to outmaneuver them before they outmaneuver us." Her words sparked heated debate among the representatives. Some suggested more fortifications. Others argued for a full-scale counterattack on Council territories to weaken their resolve. But Walker had a different plan, one that had been brewing in her mind ever since the humans' unexpected victory at the asteroid field. "We need to take the fight directly to the heart of the Council," she declared. "If we can disrupt their seat of power, we cripple their ability to retaliate. I'm talking about an attack on the Council's capital itself, Orcs Prime." Orcs Prime, the seat of the Galactic Council, was the political and military center of the galaxy. It was heavily fortified, surrounded by a fleet of warships, and protected by the most advanced defense systems in the galaxy. To even consider attacking it seemed like madness. But Walker knew that their only hope for victory was to force the Council into a position where they couldn't recover. The human fleet would need to be strategic. Walker ordered the assembly of a special task force of elite ships, including stealth cruisers and sabotage teams. Their mission: to infiltrate the heavily guarded system of Orcs Prime, cripple the defenses, and leave the Council vulnerable. At the same time, Walker sent out covert messages to their allies in the rebel coalition, those who had defected from the Council or remained neutral. She knew that if the attack on Orcs Prime succeeded, the rest of the galaxy would see that the humans weren't just a rebellious species. They were capable of changing the very balance of power. The plan was risky, but the urgency was undeniable. As Walker's task force gathered, the Council was already preparing its counterattack. In an effort to suppress the growing rebellion, they began deploying fleets of warships, each larger and more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Entire systems were put under siege, with the Council's forces ruthlessly crushing any opposition. On the other side, the humans were readying themselves for the most dangerous mission they had ever undertaken. As Walker stood before her fleet, preparing to lead the assault, she spoke one final time. "This is it," she said, her voice steady. "We take the fight to them. We show them that humanity isn't just a flash in the pan. We are the future." As the human fleet set its course for the heart of the Council, the galaxy watched. Every species, every ally, every enemy knew that the outcome of this war would determine not only the fate of the humans, but the future of the entire galaxy. The first shots would soon be fired. The night before the assault on Orcs Prime, Commander Sarah Walker stood at the bridge of the flagship Pride of Humanity, staring out at the vastness of space. Her mind was sharp, but the weight of the mission pressed heavily on her shoulders. This wasn't just another battle. It was the final gambit. If the humans could succeed in crippling the Galactic Council's power base, they might win the war. If they failed, however, the consequences would be catastrophic. Walker's eyes scanned the fleet that had gathered for the mission. Hundreds of ships, from agile fighter craft to stealthy reconnaissance vessels, were positioned in formation around her. The elite task force was a mix of battle-hardened veterans and fresh recruits, all united in their singular purpose: to breach the heart of the Council's power. She felt the pulse of anticipation running through her crew. "We're going to make history," she muttered to herself. The plan was as audacious as it was dangerous. The first phase involved a decoy mission. A small fleet would create a distraction by attacking a nearby system under Council control. The goal was to draw as much attention as possible away from Orcs Prime, allowing Walker's main fleet to slip past the defenses unnoticed. If they could reach the outer perimeter of Orcs Prime undetected, they would have only one shot at it. Meanwhile, covert teams, specialized human operatives trained in infiltration and sabotage, would board Council vessels and disable key communication channels. If the Council could no longer coordinate their defenses, the human fleet would be free to strike at the heart of Orcs Prime's military infrastructure. As the fleet approached the Council capital, the reality of the mission set in. The Council's defenses were formidable, but humanity had spent months gathering intelligence, studying every flaw, every crack in the seemingly impenetrable fortress. They knew how to exploit them. Walker's eyes narrowed as she watched the stars stretch into a blur as the fleet's warp engines engaged, and soon they were deep inside Council space, close enough to feel the heat of the capital's military presence. The decoy mission had worked. Council forces were in disarray, scrambling to respond to the fake attack. Walker smiled grimly. Phase 1. Success. But they had no time to savor the victory. The real challenge lay ahead. Orcs Prime was visible now, a shining jewel of power. Its massive space stations and orbital defenses surrounded the planet like an iron cage. Thousands of ships patrolled the system, each ready to destroy any intruder on sight. "Prepare for Phase 2, Walker ordered, her voice steady. "All ships, form up and stay alert. No mistakes." The human fleet began their stealth approach, carefully weaving through asteroid fields and navigating the dense outer layers of the system. They had trained for this moment. This was their time to shine. Then, the inevitable happened. A squadron of Council interceptors appeared, as if materializing from thin air. The humans' location had been compromised. Someone had tipped off the Council. Walker's heart skipped a beat. They were out of time. "Engage," she shouted. The battle erupted in a flash of light and sound. Laser fire streaked through the void as human ships swerved and dodged incoming blasts. The Council interceptors, larger and heavily armed, pounced with brutal efficiency. The decoy fleet, still a few light years away, had drawn much of the enemy's attention, but it wasn't enough. The Council had realized the true nature of the attack. Human ships fired back with everything they had. Despite their smaller numbers and lighter firepower, the humans were relentless. Their ships, nimble and fast, danced through the enemy's fire, striking key weak points. One by one, Council interceptors fell, but they were only the first wave. The battle for the skies above Orcs Prime had begun. Inside the chaos of the engagement, the sabotage teams infiltrated the first Council flagship, Sovereign's Edge. Moving swiftly through the corridors, they planted EMP charges and shut down the ship's communication networks. Within moments, the once formidable warship was rendered a floating shell, useless and blind to the battle outside. But there was no time to celebrate. The Council was responding with overwhelming force. A fleet of dreadnoughts, each capable of wiping out entire squadrons, emerged from the depths of Orcs Prime's defensive perimeter. "Now, Commander." The lead operative in the sabotage team radioed urgently. Walker didn't hesitate. "All ships, fire on the dreadnoughts. Full power to forward shields." The pride of humanity and its accompanying fleet fired in unison, releasing a barrage of missiles and plasma blasts that slammed into the nearest dreadnought. The explosion rocked the battlefield. The Council had underestimated humanity's ability to endure and retaliate. Despite the fierce resistance, Walker's fleet pushed forward. They had one mission now, to make it to the heart of Orcs Prime, to hit the Council where it would hurt the most. The battle raged on. With each passing moment, the humans chipped away at the overwhelming forces of the Council. But the real fight, The one that would determine the outcome of the war was still ahead. Orcs Prime awaited. The battle above Orcs Prime reached a fever pitch as human ships continued their relentless assault, pushing through the ever-thickening defenses of the Galactic Council. The vast dreadnoughts of the Council's fleet unleashed wave after wave of fire, but the humans, though outnumbered, fought with a fury that no one had anticipated. It was clear now, this wasn't just a war for survival. This was a war for the future of the galaxy itself. Commander Sarah Walker's voice cut through the chaos on the bridge of the Pride of Humanity. "Bring us within range of the orbital defense arrays," she ordered, her eyes locked on the advancing wall of Council ships. "We need to disable their long-range weapons before we can make our final push to the surface." The fleet, battered but not broken, maneuvered skillfully around the debris of the ongoing battle, closing the distance to the towering space stations that protected Orcs Prime. The stations were massive, each equipped with powerful laser arrays and shield generators designed to repel the most powerful of attacks. Walker knew that taking them out was the key to breaking the Council's stranglehold on the planet. "Get us a clear shot," Walker muttered as she watched the station's energy shields flicker with every strike from the Pride's heavy weapons. Her tactical officers worked furiously, calculating the trajectory of the ship's weapons. The moments felt like hours. But even as the battle raged on, there was something more critical happening below the surface of the fight. The sabotage teams had successfully infiltrated the heart of the Council's flagship, the Sovereign's Edge. Their mission was nearing its completion: to plant the final set of EMP charges within the Council's command center, which, once triggered, would send the Council's entire communication network into disarray. Captain Marcus Lee, the leader of the sabotage team, moved swiftly through the halls of the Sovereign's Edge, his heart racing. They had fought their way past security, bypassed the automated defense systems, and reached the heart of the ship, the central command center. It was heavily guarded, but their stealth tactics had allowed them to remain undetected. Now, they were moments away from delivering the final blow. "I'm setting the charges now," Lee whispered into his communicator, sweat dripping down his face. "In 5 minutes, this ship will be blind. We won't be able to get out once we trigger it." "Understood." Walker's voice crackled through the comms. "Do it, Captain." Lee planted the last EMP charge, his fingers working quickly. The Sovereign's Edge was the most advanced flagship in the Council's fleet, and if they could knock out its systems, they would cripple the Council's coordination, leaving them vulnerable to the humans' final assault. Back in orbit, the final push had begun. The Pride of Humanity and its fleet launched everything they had at the orbital defense arrays, their concentrated fire forcing shields to falter. With one final, concentrated barrage, the shield generators were down, and the way was clear. "Target the heart of Orcs Prime's military command," Walker ordered, her voice filled with determination. "This is it." Human ships advanced toward the heart of the Council's capital, the great city of Orcs Prime. The streets below were lined with towering spires and monumental structures, the epitome of Council power and authority. Yet beneath this gleaming facade, the city had grown increasingly unstable. Protests and uprisings were bubbling beneath the surface, and the attack from the humans had sparked fears of a full collapse of the Council's rule. Walker knew that the time to strike was now. With the orbital defenses destroyed and the sabotage teams completing their mission, the Council was blind. The rebellion had the upper hand. As the human fleet entered the atmosphere of Orcs Prime, they encountered heavy resistance from local militia forces who were loyal to the Council, but they were no match for the precision of the human forces. Ships dropped down into the urban chaos, launching strikes against key infrastructure, military bases, and the capital's communications hubs. The human forces were on the ground now, fighting side by side with the local rebel factions. The scene below was nothing short of apocalyptic. Explosions rocked the city, and once proud monuments to the Council's authority were shattered by the onslaught. The humans' message was clear: freedom is here, and it will not be silenced. On board the Pride of Humanity, Walker watched as the final stages of the assault unfolded. "We've broken their defenses," she said, her voice low but filled with an unshakable certainty. "Horus Prime is ours." Yet even as they took control of the heart of the Council's power, there was still one question that loomed large. What would the Council's response be now? For now, the humans had proven that they could strike at the heart of the beast. They had shattered the illusion of invincibility that had long held the galaxy in thrall to the Council. But the war was far from over, and the full extent of the Council's fury was yet to be unleashed. The galaxy was on the edge, and the next move would determine whether the humans would become the galaxy's liberators or its ultimate conquerors. The fall of Horus Prime sent shockwaves across the galaxy. What had once seemed impossible was now a reality. The humans had infiltrated the very heart of the Council, dismantling its power from the inside out. The capital, once a symbol of the Council's invincibility, was in flames. Buildings that had stood for centuries crumbled under the weight of the rebellion's fury. The Council's leadership had been decimated in the chaos, and the Galactic Senate was in complete disarray. But despite the monumental victory, the humans knew that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a much larger shift, one that would change the very fabric of the galaxy. Commander Sarah Walker stood on the observation deck of the Pride of Humanity, watching as the wreckage of Horus Prime floated in the distance, a reminder of the Council's arrogance. Her expression was unreadable, a mix of exhaustion and resolve. The battle had been long, and the costs were high, but the victory was undeniable. The Galactic Council had been shattered, but its remnants were still dangerous. Rumors spread that factions loyal to the old regime were already regrouping, preparing for one last push. The Vordar, Shalthar, and other military factions of the Council had lost their power, but they were far from defeated. What had been a unified galactic empire was now splintering into chaos, and amidst the turmoil, new powers were beginning to rise. "We've won the battle," Walker said, her voice steady as she turned to her crew. "But the war isn't over. We need to ensure that the Council doesn't come back. We need to secure every last holdout." Her officers nodded, understanding the weight of the command. There would be no peace until the remnants of the Council were erased from the galaxy entirely. The first step was establishing control over the territories once ruled by the Council. The human fleet began moving into key systems, offering protection to the colonies and neutral systems that had long lived under the oppressive rule of the Galactic Council. Rebel factions that had once been scattered now came together under the banner of humanity. There was no longer a question of loyalty. Now, it was a matter of survival. But the true challenge lay in the political vacuum left in the wake of the Council's fall. For centuries, the Council had been the governing force in the galaxy, its bureaucracy holding everything together through fear and manipulation. Without it, the galaxy teetered on the edge of anarchy. A great debate began to unfold among the human leadership. Should they take control and impose order, or should they allow the galaxy's diverse species to find their own path? The question of governance was one that Sarah Walker had long avoided, but now it was inescapable. "We can't control everything," Walker told her closest advisors. "What we can do is offer the galaxy a chance for true freedom, for each species to forge its own future." At a summit convened aboard the Pride of Humanity, leaders from every corner of the galaxy gathered to discuss the future. Former Council-aligned species, rebel factions, and neutral races, each one had a voice now. No longer would the Council dictate their fate. The humans had shown them that there was another way. Walker addressed the assembly, her voice strong and unwavering. "We stand at the crossroads of a new era. The galaxy is fractured, but that doesn't mean it's lost. It's time to rebuild, not just a new government, but a new way of life, one based on freedom, equality, and cooperation. Let the Council's tyranny be a thing of the past." For the first time in history, the galaxy began to see the potential for unity without oppression. The humans, with their relentless drive and unwavering spirit, had not only defeated the Council, they had given birth to a new vision of the galaxy. One where strength was measured not in dominance, but in cooperation and mutual respect. As the summit ended and the delegates returned to their home systems, the first seeds of a new galactic alliance were planted. It was uncertain, fragile even, but it was something the Council had never allowed to exist. A galaxy where every species had a voice, a future, and a place in the stars. The road ahead was long, and there were still many challenges to face. The remnants of the Council's military forces were scattered, still dangerous, and the galaxy's fragile peace could be easily shattered. But humanity had proven that it could rise to any challenge. It had proven that, even against overwhelming odds, a united people could change the course of history. As Walker looked out at the stars, she knew the true fight was just beginning. But this time, the galaxy was no longer bound by fear. It was free. And the dawn of this new era belonged to the brave.